Welcome, everyone, to Stepping Into Your Leadership. I'm your host, Christine Courtney. Our goal here is to give you some actionable takeaways that will help you lead your teams. Thanks for joining us on this leadership journey. Let's get started. Hello, everybody. I'm Christine Courtney, your host, and I'm so happy to be in the studio today with my partner in crime. Greg Shamie is here with us today. Hey, Greg.
Hi, everybody. How's it going?
Today, we are going to tackle the topic of offsites, or some of you may talk about them as retreats or company getaways, whatever you call it. We'll probably refer to it mostly as either an offsite or a retreat. And whether is it worth it or is it a waste of time? That's what we're going to jump into today. I think Greg and I have similar views on this, but we'll try to also point out the other part of this view. All right, Greg. So what's your thoughts?
Well, when you said, is it a waste of time? I also said, is it a waste of time and money? Because it can be very costly.
Yeah.
And that usually becomes one of the number one deterrents is, why are we going to spend all this money to go somewhere else?
Mm-hmm.
So I always appreciate that because, we run a business and we're thinking the same thing. So why do we do offsites? For ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, even just starting with that. Well, a couple of things come to mind. One is getting into a different environment is huge, right? Just even in terms of distractions, being able to go somewhere other than you are at every day together is a great way to begin. And that makes me think of that quote, coming together is a beginning, keeping together is progress, working together is success. But the coming together is very important. It's the beginning, and you need to come together with your teammates. And so coming together in a different place, those are the two things that come to mind that are super important when thinking about why invest in an offsite.
Yeah. Because, I talk to business owners and managers all the time, and they're like, oh, the thought of one, either the cost, because sometimes it's very expensive. You're oftentimes flying employees somewhere, right? So it better be worth it, what you're doing. So you have costs of airfare and transportation, or you are paying for them to, get there. You're paying for rooms. Oftentimes you're paying for catering, you're paying for space, you're paying for facilitators. It adds up, right? So when you have to, if you're the manager, the leader, or the owner, and you're having to justify that, you need to be able to show an ROI, right? What's your return on investment on what potentially could be a huge investment depending on what your offsite is. So that's one of the problems. The other problem is that sometimes you get flack from your employees who don't want to leave their homes, their families, their spouses, their kids, any of that can put a lot of pressure too. And sometimes people's anxiety comes up especially if you have the kind of budget where you have to share rooms, or, people are like, I don't like working that late, or I don't like hanging out, I don't like drinking, whatever it is that's going on. There's so many thoughts and feelings that you have to manage that sometimes people just say, oh, forget it. We'll just keep going on as is. So I think, are there any other things that get in the way? Any other roadblocks that make it sometimes not worth it? Let's just put voice to those things and then put voice to the other side of why it might be important to do this work.
Yeah, it takes a lot more energy all around to make these things happen. Again, if they're going to be effective, they have to be organized really well. You want everybody to be having a great experience, not just hotel and food and environment, but also the actual content, right? So it takes a lot of effort to really dig into these things. So that can become an obstacle as well.
Yeah. And I think those deterrents oftentimes stop us. And if they're too big for you, it might not be the right time, because you're right. It does take a tremendous amount of energy. And if you're the person spearheading it, you have to have more energy than anybody to overcome all those barriers. That being said, Greg and I both really strongly believe in the power of offsites or retreats for your company. And I'll tell you why. Because if you can muster the energy, you can muster some time and some money, you can make for transformational changes in your business that in some cases could never happen without this offsite or retreat. So let's dig into that, because if you have an inkling that this could be right for you, you're probably, I would tell you, that gut feeling is right, and not to let all those barriers get in your way. Push through, because my gosh, have I seen change in my own company in myself, when I've done things just alone for myself, when I've done it for my company, incredible change. And when we facilitated for other companies. So this could be from a very small experience to very large. It could be a half day at Central Park to, flying your folks to Colorado. Whatever it is, there is a spectrum of possibility. And I would say to you that don't let your worries about money or time get in the way if you really want to do it. And let's talk about some of the benefits. So Greg, what do you see? What's one benefit that you have seen?
There's so many benefits I've seen, and I'm thinking about actually the ones we've done for people, right? Like we were saying, we do our own offsites for our internal teams, but doing it for clients, something that sticks out to me is that once you've organized this in an effective way and it starts, you have your people all together there with no distractions. And so you're going to get 100%, hopefully, once they buy in that, hey, this is well organized. This is nicely done. Oh, this is interesting content. Oh, this is really pertinent and relevant to my job and to us sharing information with each other and building a cohesive team. So most of the time, I'm being pulled left, right, and center, and I'm just doing the job as best I can, and I'm missing the connectivity. And so the biggest benefit that comes to mind is the connectivity that happens between me and my other players that run the company, and being able to get sparked by that sharing of information, sharing of ideas, strategy, all that stuff that's going to be coming out of these sessions that we dig into 100% together, where we never have that opportunity because we're working.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. So really, we're talking about connectivity. 1, 2, limiting distractions from our lives, right? So that we can focus. All together focus can be incredibly powerful. And I think that idea you alluded to, but just to underline it for everybody, is taking us out of our natural environment, taking us out, whether it's that you work in the same cubicles all the time, taking us out of that environment, or whether you're remote and you're finally coming together, or whether you're hybrid and you finally get to interact with different people in person. All of those things are really critical to taking us out of our everyday and putting us in a new space, because it opens up our brain to actually be more innovative, think of new ideas, connect in, like you said, in different ways. I think another definite benefit besides those things are also this idea of creating experience with your team members. One of the things they say is the research shows, if you buy somebody a gift, that it has a very short lifespan in terms of what it gives you, right? The joy it gives you, the feeling it gives you. However, if you have an experience or you spend money on an experience, what that shows is that actually grows over time. And so we have memories, for instance, just us, we have memories of our people at retreats for, 20 years now, that we bring up a line or a moment and everybody laughs or everybody immediately gels together. And that you cannot pay enough money in the world for that feeling. And studies are showing that the younger generations want and crave experience and experience with others more than older generations. So if you're the type that's like, I don't need that, well, think about your younger folks, because they travel more, they go out to dinner more, and they also like to retreat together, create experiences together, be in nature together, be in, challenges together. All of those things that you can create at an offsite that can actually last you the whole year, especially if you don't get that kind of connection all year long. Did you have a thought, Greg?
Well, yeah, I love this whole creating experiences, because that's what we do. And in reflecting back on our own personal offsites, I mean, the memories are just gargantuan and incredible. And most of them are from challenges that we had where we had to overcome a problem. We were put into team building challenges, and they were super fun. We all had to figure out what our strengths were, what our areas, that we could bring to the team in order to overcome the task. And then we had to do it. And in that, we created these emotionally exciting experiences that last forever. And so what does that do for me in the workplace? It does a ton, because what happens to me when I'm back in the river doing the work and I look over and I've had this really super fun experience where I've overcome some stuff together with another teammate, and we have to work now with this client and really make sure that we're doing the same concept, but in the workplace. And it's a phenomenal bond that can't be erased.
Yeah, I've seen team members who do not get along, like who have lots of conflict, come together at a retreat with maybe it's a moment singing a song around a fire, a bonfire, or it's, doing karaoke, or it's doing a challenge, a ropes course or something, where all of a sudden those two people are bonded like crazy. And so it doesn't take away all the conflict in the workplace, but it certainly lightens it up and gives them a new vocabulary for how they can communicate or how they can be together in a different way.
You're just like sparking a memory of mine with a team on an offsite. This was a client I was facilitating, and two of the members didn't speak. And I remember the CEO had come up to me and was like, listen, these folks have some serious conflict. And so it's going to be awkward. I just want you to be aware of it. And that helped me a lot as a facilitator, because then I was aware of it and I could slowly scaffold or build in the importance of getting their voices into the space, slowly the different perspectives, validating the perspectives that were coming into the space, having them do activities, but knowing how to group them, and then getting them to eventually connect and bond. And it happened. And it was the most incredible thing that took place, where these two people didn't really communicate at all, did their jobs separately from each other, and there was tremendous conflict. And by the end of this offsite, there was a bond that had been created. And that to me was a huge success.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that conflict piece is huge. Like if you're having toxicity and conflict in the workplace, hello, everybody. Another benefit can come from these getaways together is to resolve some of that.
Yeah. And you see it right away. And what's good is that you're having fun or you're doing something that's different. And so it takes a little bit of the stress off of the work itself and actually makes the work product go further, because you're pushed in a different way. Your defenses go down a little bit more. You see something differently. There's a little bit of breath and space around it. Before we get into tips on how to do this, Greg, yourself, and it could be on a budget, or it could, be that you have a large amount of money to use. But before we go into that, I also want to say that it's really important to do these kinds of offsites, not just with your company. Do them with your spouse. Do them with your best friends. You can really change the quality of your relationships just by doing it. Do it with your kids and call it this. We're going to go, instead of just a vacation, we're going to do a family retreat for the weekend. We're going to talk about our core values as a family. Or if it's, in my case, I go sometimes with my girlfriends, and we always, have some sort of idea of growth and expansion and fun that we're going to put into it. All right. So let's talk about some tips on how to do an offsite if you're thinking about doing it. What's one tip that you have, Greg?
Well, I think, what becomes most important is when I've decided I'm going to do an offsite is figuring out what you want to get out of this. What is your super objective, as I like to call it, for this? What are specifically the outcomes you want to have by the time this is over, whether it's a half day, a full day, a 3-day experience, right? And so getting clear on what you want the results to be, I think is super important. And that gives you a big objective to go for that helps align everything else.
Yes. I'll add on that in doing our own retreats, I'm always coming up with a theme of what's important for the whole year. And a lot of times, I'd say all the times, this does not come from me. So I go to the folks that are kind of key people at identifying these within my organization. And I ask them, what do you think the theme should be of this retreat, which will then impact the entire year? So for instance, this particular year, somebody in our organization said, I really want to focus on this idea of buoying each other, of being buoyed to each other, of being connected when things are tough, of being kind of buoys for each other. And so that stuck in my head, and I just wrote down that thought. And then I thought, okay, and I talked to a few other people. And while they didn't use the term buoy, they did use the term of trying to stay connected to each other when times are tough. And so I went back later when I looked at it and I thought, okay, what's this idea of buoy? And I went into like kind of a deep research of that word and so forth. And then started to structure activities, especially in the beginning, and that they would do at the end, that were related to that theme. So then the challenges that we had, for instance, we created buoys, real buoys that teams created that had to float out of objects. They had cardboard and they had duct tape and they had floaties and they had rope and they had markers, and they had to create something. They had to create a floating buoy that they could put out into the water that could stay up and float, but also reflect themselves and what they bring to the group. And so that was written on it with markers and stuff. And so that started off our retreat, getting them thinking about that. Like, who am I? What do I give to people? How do I buoy other people? How do we stay buoyed together? And then hopefully throughout the retreat, you have some activities that while they will go off and touch other things, touch upon that theme. And then when the other person that I was facilitating with at the end of the couple of days, she went back and did an activity that referenced that buoying idea and kind of put a bow in it, so that this year when we come back to our meetings or we talk about things, everybody's on board with that image or that visual of being buoyed by each other. So that's just one idea of a theme. They're different every year. Sometimes they've been around fire. Sometimes they've been around the rocks that we carry. There's all sorts of different themes depending on what's going on with the organization. And I never trust myself to know. So I always ask some people who really are attuned to others and what's going on with everybody to kind of sit with their ideas for a little while before coming up with the theme.
I think that's the best practice, Christine, for sure. And a great example to have that kind of thought prior put into this, and getting a group of people together on your team who are interested in gathering this kind of information and then coming up with these ideas based on what they gather from the team members. I think it's fantastic, and it really does set you up for success. And I love the idea of like, why are we doing this? Why are we making this investment right now? And how is it going to benefit us for the next chapter?
Yeah.
Right? Moving forward. I think that's absolutely key and very helpful to do.
Even if we're doing this not for our own company, but for other companies, we go through a process of helping them. Like Greg said, what are the outcomes you want so that you leave this retreat? What feeling do you want everybody to have? And then we work backwards from there. And also, what do you perceive as things that could be the theme for the year? What would you want? Sometimes those are around alignment. If everybody was really focused in the same way, like a special forces troop, we've done things around that kind of special forces idea, or a sports team. How do we get people on board with those types of feelings? It could be anything depending on where you are. But if you start with the end in mind, Greg, you're 100% right. You're going to have more chance of reaching that goal. What else? What's another tip that we have? I have one if you don't.
Yeah, go ahead and let's build on it.
Okay. 2, I would say find other people to help you. So don't think you're going to do this alone. It's a lot of work. Find other people to help you, whether that's if you have a budget and you can hire somebody to, at the bare minimum, facilitate, because the facilitator is much harder role to fill than the people who can coordinate all the activities. While coordinating might sound difficult to you, I bet you have somebody in your office that can do that. But facilitating allows you as the leader to also step back and participate rather than having to do dual roles as facilitator and participant. So it's really nice and such a luxury when I've been able to step back and let somebody else facilitate to really see things clearer, watch how my team reacts, how they participate, look for things that I can't always see when I'm facilitating. So if you have any sort of budget, that to me, that piece of it is key. But also, if you don't, there are people on your team that can help you in so many ways, and to give people pieces of things to take over, whether it's you're in charge of this lunch, or you're in charge of this hike, or you're in charge of coming up with what activity we can do at night. People love to do stuff. They want to be involved, and it takes a lot of pressure off of you.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And being able to delegate the pieces out, right? And bring in different energies to do different things. A lot of times we do the whole thing, but sometimes we'll go in and do a piece too. If it's like they want a strategic vision session, 1-3-5 year vision type of thing with like working on re-solidifying their values or what have you, we can go in and do that in a half day. It's nice to have other people come in and do something really effectively, because then it also propels your other folks to be, when they're standing up to do something, to be inspired by that and learn from that and be able to bring something exciting themselves.
Yeah. Tatiana, our producer, wants to say something. Yeah.
I have a tip too. My yes and to Greg's tip of having someone outside do it is also making sure that you're processing activities. I remember one retreat where we had to build a bridge that a car would drive over, and we failed miserably. And so the outside facilitator was determined that we made this bridge. So then their staff started to build the bridge for us.
That's right.
I was appalled because the activity we failed and the learning that could have happened if we would have discussed, and we did, because of course Greg was not going to let it go, but we had to process that we failed, because we fail sometimes, and that's okay. And that was such a missed opportunity. So I think, yes, have an outside person do something, of course, because I love that, but also making sure that the activities are processed.
Yes.
And that you're questioning, because that is where the learning is going to happen. And that's where the connection back to your theme is so important, because like it was such a missed opportunity for that organization to help us go through talking about failure. And I always remember that as a big fail for them. I would never use them again for that one reason.
And just to clarify for folks listening, when Tatiana says process, that's our language for really debriefing post any kind of experience or activity that you do. It's really like, okay, well, what happened for you? What happened for us as the group? What lessons came out of it? What did we learn? And what are we going to do differently moving forward? I mean, that's simple. Just asking your team members those questions, and that's going to lead you into them having some realizations that are going to be super helpful in connecting it back to their work.
Yeah, and that is the difference between having professional facilitators and having people who just maybe work at the hotel who run an activity. If they're running AeroTag, they know how to set up AeroTag to keep you guys safe, but they don't know how to process the activity with you. So don't expect that those folks are knowing how to do that, because that is a definite skill that you need a facilitator to do. And Tatiana, thank you for reminding me of that moment. That was incredible, because you could tell that their goal was for us to succeed, even if it meant them themselves doing it, not us, right? And so we had to process that kind of on our own separately. That's a good reminder. All right. Another tip is to think about a combination of activities. So no matter if you're doing this in your backyard because you have no money, or you can get the most high priced hotel in Switzerland, you want to have a combination of activities to appeal to everybody. So you want to have a combination of some sort of nature and outdoors. And I got to tell you that probably the number one complaint we get from people who go to offsites is that they go to these beautiful places and then stay inside a conference room all day. That is 100% the number one problem. And the problem, I understand it from the ownership point of view, is you've gotten all these minds together, you're paying all this money, and you want to have these sessions, these thinking sessions, these planning sessions, and it's difficult to do that outside, right? But you really want to have as much experience with nature or wherever you are outside that is different than what they're used to. They will be very frustrated if it's a beautiful day and they're inside looking out at windows, and then night comes and they're like, oh my God, why were we even here? We could have been in our offices or at our homes. So think about how to make sure that you're incorporating nature, outdoors, that you have some sort of combination of fun, that you have some sort of challenges, like physical challenges, like Greg was talking about, but also maybe like puzzles or mind challenges, or also hands-on building things. Like some people are builders and like to, do kind of art projects within their challenges. And then some people are real sporty and physical and want to have some sort of physical challenge. So you want to have a little bit of both so that everybody's a little outside of their comfort zone, but not outside their comfort zone the whole time. Right? You want to have something where they're also in teams, so people who like to do that stuff can excel and other people can sit back. And so you have this idea of I'm leading now, I'm stepping back, and everybody has a chance to feel good. And then also people have a chance to like assess themselves and, where they are and where other people are.
I think it's so good, Christine, that variation is key. And I like to get those team building activities going early on as I build the group. And then from there, dig into strategic stuff, right? Because once I've had that experience, then I can I'm not only physically and mentally perked up and ready, but now I'm ready to dig into, okay, let's look at the business and let's strategically, come up with some plans and action plans on how we want to move this forward together based on where we're at, what's happened in the past, and how we want to move forward better. So I think it's combining activities is huge.
Yeah, perfect. And it's the way that he just structured it, really important. So first, when you get there, you break the ice with some immediate fun, low stakes team building. You don't jump into a huge ropes course right away. You start off with some very light, fun, get to know you, everyone's nervous. So you're a little more comfortable, lighthearted, fun, and do that outside. If you have a beautiful day, do those activities outside 100% so that people are outside right away. I just was with this past few days with a group of CEOs, and that's what we did. It was a beautiful few days. We did outside. I had them do activities to get to know each other, working in teams, fast paced, music on, dance, whatever, outside in nature. And then they went, after they were doing that and got to have some interaction with the whole group, they went on what we call a wisdom walk, where they walked around the lake that was there. So not a difficult walk, but a hike, but flat mostly. So everybody could do it. But then along the way, they had these huge ducks that they had to find, rubber ducks, and they were colorful so you could spot them along the way. And then underneath it said a question or prompt for them to talk about. So it could be like, what's the biggest risk you've taken in your business so far? And then you put that duck down and you walk and talk and so forth along the lake till you find the next duck that leads you to what keeps you up at night, right? So these were questions that were for a bunch of different CEOs, but for your company, you could see how that wisdom walk could be related, right? Then that first day, you've had some good one-on-one time. You've had some good group time, and then you're going to have a great meal and some fun at night. And then the next day, Greg's right, dig into some content inside, focused, whether it's your vision, mission, values, whether it's your goals for the year, whether it's how to get more aligned, whether it's learning a new skill, right? Whether it's learning Working Genius, for example, or certain kinds of leadership styles, whatever it is that your group needs. And then you spend the night, outside again that night and doing something outside. But that indoor time is important because you're going to lose them if you're outside working on alignment and strategic vision.
Oh, you just made me think of another important piece before we bring this to an end too, is the ending itself and how important the final activities are of an offsite. Because it gives, again, the importance to their voices of the participants and the experiences of the participants. And so doing a really strong closing that allows you to reflect back on why we did this, what came out of it, what got sparked for you, what's sticking with you, and what are you going to put into action because, which is absolutely so important, is huge. And then obviously some appreciation is something we always like to build in too, because then you end up leaving with an opportunity to give some props to your fellow teammates based on the creative experiences you've had together.
Yeah. And feeling that back, right? That's a great feeling to leave with. So those are two great things: action steps, your takeaways, and then some sort of appreciation, gratitude for this time together and for each other. I also just want to say that just as important as the ending, which it is because it's a catapult, right? It's a catapult to spring from, is the beginning. How do you make people feel cared for? I have some folks on my staff who are great at this. And in the past, they've thought about it. Do we have a bag made for them? Do we have some swag that they don't know about that we leave in their room? Do they get something that makes them think, with snacks or things that are carefully curated for them? Can make somebody feel really appreciated. And I always start by thanking them for giving up this time with their family and friends and pets and so forth to make this happen. That's really key to letting everybody let go of any sort of bitterness or feelings of why am I here? I've got so much stress at home, or I got to find a dog sitter or whatever it is.
Yeah, you always do that. It does. It totally is thank you for acknowledging what I've had to do to come here. So I always really appreciate it. And it does allow me to sink into what's about to come.
Yeah.
The other thing I just thought of, Christine, is so the beginning, the ending, they're obviously super important. As the ending happens, what's the next connection to what just happened? So if you do come out of it with someone who's put together, some company goals or whatever content you've created in the offsite together, right? That's going to propel you forward. What are the next steps? So the debrief that happens post the offsite, and how do you keep that energy going post the offsite? So most people, it just drops. And so having intentional connectivity to that, I think is huge.
Huge. That's a great last thing to leave everybody with. We hope you try it. Even if you have no money, don't let that stop you. Even if you have no time, like I've said, I've done them in the park where everybody's met at the park with their Metro card or whatever in hand. They bring their own lunch if you can't afford it, but just get out of your norm. At least once a year, people will remember it. It creates experience. If you have a ton of money to do something really cool, a friend of mine, a CEO, took all his staff to Red Rocks this year in Colorado. What an experience they had there, right? You can do anything that you put your mind to, and your staff will remember it. So jump into it. If you need help, reach out to us. We're happy to give you ideas or help. Our website also has lots of ideas and resources for you. So thanks you guys for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Christine. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks everybody for listening. I'd like to give a special shout out to our podcast producer, Richard Francisco. Check out our notes for any details. And if you get anything out of this, please follow us. And if you enjoy it, please take a moment to rate us or write a comment. It will mean the world to us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you just can't get enough, follow me on TikTok and check out tlpnyc.com/podcast for more information.